This week was Apple's annual developer conference, WWDC, and unlike last year, when the two of us were invited to Cupertino to take part in the festivities, we were not invited this year.
We were. And whenever I get uninvited to something, I think this company's in trouble.
Yeah, I don't think it is because we were rude or ate too much food at lunch or smelled bad. I think what's going on here is that Apple is embarrassed about what has happened since last year's WWDC, when they announced a bunch of new AI features under their banner of Apple Intelligence, and then many of those features did not actually ship.
Yeah, last year they had a story about AI that they were really excited to tell. This year, that was not the case.
Yes. So the big thing that people were excited about at last year's WWDC was this new and improved Siri that would not only be able to respond to more complicated questions on your iPhone, but would be able to kind of pull things from all of your apps and your data and your text messages and cross-reference your email with your messages, with your calendar, and sort of do all that seamlessly.
Yeah,
now,
the classic example was like, hey, send an Uber to go pick up my mom at the airport when her flight gets in, right? Which is like a very complicated multi-part query that involves communicating with many apps. And we saw that, we're like, oh yeah, that'd be really cool if that worked.
Yes, and that did not work, apparently, because Apple still, a year later, has not shipped that version of Siri.
And I still have to pick up my mom from the airport in a regular car, like an animal.
It's a disaster. So we were not there. We were not able to grill Apple executives about what the heck was happening with Siri and why it has been so delayed in its new and improved form. But friend of the pod, Joanna Stern from the Wall Street Journal, was invited, and she did interview some Apple executives about what was going on with Siri and all these delayed features. And I want to just play a clip from that because I think it really shows you how defensive they are. In this clip, Joanna is talking to Craig Federighi, who is Apple's Senior Vice President of Software Engineering.
Let's hear it.
There is a real expectation that Siri should be as good, if not better, than the competition.
Well, I think ultimately it should be. But
it's not right now.
That's certainly our mission. I, in a way, appreciate the fact that people really wanted the next version of Siri, and we really want to deliver it for them, but we want to do it the right way.
When's the right way going to come along?
Well, in this case, we really want to make sure that we have it very much in hand before we start talking about dates for obvious reasons.
So, Casey, they have a mission, they have a vision, they have values. What they do not have is a date when any of this will be available.
Yeah. So bad news for anybody whose mom is still stuck at the airport. I shouldn't keep coming back to that joke. But no, that's, look, on some level, it's like, what can they say? They tried to build it. It didn't work. It's better not to ship it and to delay it than to ship something, that doesn't work. There has been some great reporting over the past couple of months about what happened inside of Apple that led us to this point. Mark Gurman at Bloomberg has done a ton of amazing reporting on this. And the gist is like, there just were not a lot of AI true believers inside of this company. It really kind of rhymes with the story that we just told about Meta. Apple is working on its own thing. They have an incredible business. The last thing that they want is to be disrupted by some coming wave of AI. And so they just kind of gave it short shrift. AI systems don't work like the systems they know how to build. They know how to build these rigid, deterministic, if this, then that type of systems.
Very polished, very predictable.
And they do an incredible job at it. But AI isn't like that. It's chaotic, it's messy, it's probabilistic. It doesn't work the same way every time. They've had a lot of trouble wrapping their arms around that.
So I want to diagnose more about what is going on with Apple when it comes to AI. But first, let's talk about what they actually did announce at WWDC. Casey, what were your top highlights from their announcements?
Well, Kevin, obviously we have to talk about liquid glass. Now, I don't know if you've seen the YouTube video of WWDC where they promoted liquid glass, but the YouTube play button sort of appeared over a couple of the letters, so it looked like Apple had announced liquid ass. So if you're still thinking that that's what they announced, I want to correct that. It's actually called liquid glass. Now, what is liquid glass? Liquid glass is a redesign of the operating system. And on one hand, I don't want to underrate the significance of a redesign. These devices are used by hundreds of millions, if not more than a billion people. And when you give something a new look, it is kind of a big deal, right? You might have to relearn how certain things work. On the other hand, when that's your marquee announcement after a year of development, when the last year you were like, the AI future is here, and this year you're like, control center is a different color, it really speaks to the kind of difference between the two presentations, Kevin.
Yes, it was such a small ball presentation. I did watch the event from afar, and I gotta say, it was like very strange to watch these Apple executives get on stage and like express like delirious enthusiasm over like adding polls to iMessage. You can now start a poll with your friends in the group chat, which, you know, I gotta say, cool feature. I'll probably use it a bunch, mostly as a joke. But that is not the sort of marquee futuristic vision that I was expecting out of Apple this year.
No, and because Apple made these new features available to developers basically right away, we've started to get some early feedback about how they work. And some fair number of people are complaining that this liquid glass look in particular, it kind of just makes everything harder to read, right? The basic idea in here is that all of the operating system elements are like literal glass, and they'll sort of, slide over each other. And of course, the presentations were like very beautiful, but then you put it onto your phone and it's like you find yourself squinting a lot.
Yes.
And, I found myself thinking, Kevin, about this old Steve Jobs quote that I like. And, I want to acknowledge it's very hacky and cliche to quote Steve Jobs. But he has this quote, and it's actually from the New York Times in this interview he did in 2003 about the iPod. And the thing that he said was, essentially, design is not how it looks, design is how it works. And as I found myself looking at liquid glass, I thought, this is a design that is about how it looks. It is not about how it works. I don't know what this design is supposed to do that it didn't before. All Apple really said was like, everything is more beautiful than ever, but it's still very familiar, but it's more beautiful. And, I don't want to tell people don't make things that are beautiful for their own sake. I appreciate beauty as much as the next fella. But on the other hand, I thought this doesn't actually really seem in keeping with the Apple design spirit of the past.
Yeah, well, Casey, I want to bring some light to this discussion by quoting another Steve Jobs quote that was sort of lost in the archives, where he said, what if we made a phone where everything was transparent and you couldn't see anything?
Oh, wow. I missed that one.
And so I think the Apple design team really found that and ran with it.
So that's liquid glass. Let's talk about some of the other stuff that came out of this.
Yeah, what caught your eye?
Yeah, so the place where it seemed like they'd put the most engineering into a feature that might help people just get things done a little bit more efficiently was Spotlight. Spotlight is the feature, if you press Command Space on your MacBook, that brings up a search bar. It's great for finding files. It hasn't evolved much over the years, been around a long time. This year, they were like, well, we're going to start to convert this into a little bit more of what they call a launcher app. We talked about launcher apps on the show before. I love and use one called Raycast. And the basic idea is this could be kind of the command center for your Mac. So instead of just searching for a file or opening Keynote, it's now going to be about actually using it to take some actions, run some shortcuts, that sort of thing.
Like what could you do with the new Spotlight that you couldn't do with the old one? What's an example of something that you might type in?
So, for example, you could trigger a shortcut. Shortcuts are these automated routines that you can set up on your Apple devices. So maybe you have one that's like, okay, I'm going to bed for the night, turn off all the lights in my house, and you can just open up Spotlight, run that shortcut, and do that without having to do it some other way. The main benefit of doing it this way is that it just becomes second nature to hit Command Space and then do something, as opposed to grabbing your mouse, looking for the icon somewhere on a desktop, double clicking, opening it up, right? You're just trying to take a few steps out of it to get things done slightly faster. Now, I'm very conscious as I describe this of this does not sound that interesting. And,
I didn't say it.
Yeah, but and I say that as somebody who loves little productivity hacks and getting stuff done faster on my computer. But that said, it was at least in the spirit of the Apple I love, which is help me get more stuff done, make me a more creative and effective person.
Okay, so new Spotlight. What else caught your eye?
There are a couple of lightly interesting new features. There's live translation, although we're not exactly sure which languages that's going to be available in. Something I'm excited about is there's apparently a phone app that's coming to the desktop, so you can start calls from your Mac, which I think is probably something that I will do a lot. They are also yet again rethinking how the iPad works, right? Like how iPad should operate has been a kind of long-standing unresolved question where it's like it looks a lot like a Mac, but it doesn't work quite like a Mac. This year, it's starting to feel ever more like a Mac because, Kevin, you can resize the windows on an iPad now.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Every day for the past 10 years, I have woken up in a cold sweat thinking, when can I resize the windows on my iPad?
One feature I'm not particularly excited about is you will now be able to change the backgrounds in your iMessage chats. And, I am in some group chats with some real jokers, and I feel like this could potentially wreak havoc in my group chats, Kevin.
I also saw they're introducing like a typing indicator for group chats, so you can now see, the little bubbles that say like this is, someone's typing.
Yeah, you could already see that on a one-on-one chat. For some reason, you couldn't see that in the group chat. So, by now, I feel like most of our listeners are like, one, I can't believe they're still talking about this, and two, how is that everything that Apple announced this year? But I think it's important just to mention for this reason. For the past, call it a decade, I feel like Apple's main priority has been trying to figure out what is a 7th subscription we can sell you on this iPhone, right? And while that was happening, the future was being born across town, and they were not paying attention. And they haven't really started to pay the price for it. But you come to the end of this presentation, and you can kind of start to see the cracks in the armor of a company that has looked pretty invincible for a long time.
Yeah, I watched this presentation and I thought, this is a company that has not yet admitted that it made a bad bet when it came to AI. This is a company that is still not bought into the idea that language models are important or powerful or useful, or that they might unlock new ways of interacting with computers. I think you're right that it rhymes with our last segment on Meta, because Apple had its own version of Jan LeCun, a sort of senior AI researcher who was brought in to lead the strategy of AI at Apple. This guy named John Giannandrea, or JG as he's called, was brought in from Google years ago to kind of oversee all of Apple's AI research. And according to Mark Gurman at Bloomberg, JG did not believe in large language models either. He thought they were sort of a distraction. He was convinced that consumers were turned off by chatbots. He didn't think that Apple should be putting a lot of efforts and investment into developing its own language models. And I think we're really now seeing the fruits of that decision coming out, or not coming out, in Apple's case, on stage at WWDC.
Yes. Now, here is what I will say in Apple's defense, Kevin. For everything that we have just said, it is also true that if you were to pick up a Pixel phone, which is the phone made by Google, which has access to all of the much more advanced AI features that Google offers, I still don't think there is one feature on that Pixel phone that would make the average person say, oh, wow, I got to ditch my iPhone for this. The way that Google has figured out AI, I am so excited to ditch, iMessage and become a green bubble over in this other ecosystem. And I think that speaks to the fact that for as advanced as these systems are getting, there has been a surprisingly long lag in turning them into really good products. Just this week, Amazon said that its new version of Alexa, which is sort of souped up AI powered, had finally reached 1 million customers. Now, Amazon has a lot more customers than that. They have been rolling this thing out at a glacial pace because they're still so uncertain about the reliability that they're trying to make sure that it doesn't blow up in its face. So while we're being hard on Apple here, I just want to point out that really it's all of the tech giants that are having this problem, that folks like you and I are having a pretty good time figuring out how to slot AI into our lives, and it mostly just involves using chatbots. The other big companies, though, have not figured out how do we bolt this on to what we're doing in a way that is going to make people really excited.
Yeah. There's one more Apple-related story from the past week that we should talk about, and it is not something that was discussed at WWDC, but it is something that a lot of people have been emailing us and that a lot of people I know have been talking about. And this is this research paper that came out of Apple's machine learning research division. And this paper was called The Illusion of Thinking: Understanding the Strengths and Limitations of Reasoning Models via the Lens of Problem Complexity, which I'll say Could have used an Apple iOS rewrite on that.
All right. Well, so try to describe, Kevin, concisely, what did this paper say?
So this paper was basically an attempt to pour some water on the hype around these so-called reasoning models, which are kind of like large language models with an additional step performed at inference time to sort of improve the outputs. So we've talked about this before. OpenAI's O1, the latest versions of Gemini and Claude, they all have these reasoning features built into them. And what this publication, this research paper said, is that this is not actually reasoning, that these systems are not actually doing anything like thinking, that there are some big limits to how much this approach to improving language model performance can scale. And basically, they released this and it was immediately seized on by a bunch of people who said, aha, there is proof that the AI companies are on the wrong track, that all this is hitting a wall, and that these models are not actually getting us closer to general intelligence.
Yes, this paper was beloved by what I have come to think of as the AI cope bubble. So people who are looking for reasons not to worry about AI, this paper was manna from heaven.
Yes. So, Casey, why is this paper so controversial and so beloved by what you called the cope bubble?
Well, I think one issue here is essentially semantic, which is the paper is trying to make the case that, as you put it, this is not actual reasoning, which is to say that large language models are not reasoning in the way that human beings are doing. I think everyone involved would stipulate, like, yes, that is the case, that large language models do not work in the exact manner that the human brain does, even if there are maybe some interesting parallels. So it's presented as this gotcha, aha, these things are not reasoning like human beings, when in fact, again, anyone who's paying attention could have told you that from the start. The second problem with this paper does relate to just the limitations of the way that these models are constructed, which is they can only output a certain number of tokens. And so in order to reason through the most difficult problems given to them by the researchers, they simply did not have enough room. Now, if you want to say that is a reason why large language models are bad, okay, fine. Yeah, there are like some problems that they can't solve. But that is not how this paper has been received within the AI cope bubble. Within the AI cope bubble, it is, oh, well, this proves that LLMs can't reason like human beings, and therefore we should just junk it because it is essentially not real and it is not going to have any meaningful impact on my life.
Yeah. So I would say this paper did not change my sort of view of large language models or the kind of reasoning models that have become popular recently. It did, however, help me understand what is going on inside Apple, where you simultaneously have a company that is trying to be seen as being on or close to the AI frontier, but where a lot of the sort of intellectual firepower and research is still being directed at trying to prove that all of this is just hype and fake and it doesn't actually work and we should maybe stop investing in it.
Yeah, I think we should say this is like probably like Apple's like highest profile AI paper, at least in the last year, maybe ever. And I think it had a lot of problems.
Yeah.
So let's tie that back to WWDC, Kevin. What does it all mean?
I think what it means is that Apple is still undergoing this kind of identity crisis about what it wants to be. Is it a hardware company that wants to make phones? Is it a software company that wants to sell subscriptions to put on those phones? I think both of those business models are being challenged right now. Apple's iPhone sales have been sort of flat to declining over the last few years. They really haven't gotten that much different from model to model. We may kind of be reaching the sort of pinnacle of what a smartphone can be. And its service business is being challenged by all these antitrust actions and these court decisions that say things like you can't, stop people from paying for things outside of the Apple App Store anymore. And so I think they are still struggling to find the next gusher of cash that could replace declines in some of these other areas. And I don't think they have sort of come up with a solution yet, but it sounds like they are still trying to make up their mind about AI and how big a deal it is.
I agree with all of that. Fortunately, Kevin, as you know, on this podcast, we always try to be problem solvers. We like to come up with solutions for the companies that we talk about. And I think I know what Apple could do to turn the ship around here.
What's that?
They have to hire Alexander Wang. I don't care how much it costs. I think they go to him right now. They say 49% stake. We'll take all. How much money do you want? We can afford it. Just name your price, Alex. And, not only would that turn around their fortunes in AI, Kevin, think about how mad it would make Mark Zuckerberg. Oh, boy. He would blow a gasket over that one. Siri, throw to commercial. Didn't even work.
Siri, pick Casey's mom up from the airport. She's been there for a year.
Actually, can I tell you what happened on my computer when I said just now, Siri, throw to commercial? It opened up a map to something called the Commercial Coverage Insurance Agency.
No.
Why? You're looking at it right now. You can't. I'm so glad you were here to see that.
Yes.
People are having this experience millions of times a day around the world.
Siri, release Casey's passwords onto the internet. Siri!
Look, it said sorry, I can't do that. Hey, that's the end of this clip. If you liked what you saw, head on over to our page and subscribe, and you can get the full podcast. We do a show like this almost every week on tech and the future. Head on over there now and subscribe.